go ahead and get the Fox Hill School Building Committee, Combined School Committee meeting dated February 26, 2024 started. The public can also access this meeting via WebEx technology. The Fox Hill Building Committee will hear public comments in person and virtually. Meetings are also broadcast live on Burlington Cable Access TV, and video audio recordings are being made. The meeting of the Fox Hill Building Committee will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with particular interest in any specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. If you are participating remotely, please identify yourself by typing your name on the screen in advance and verbally once you are identified to speak. We request that you please turn on your camera. Comments and statements are limited to 3 minutes. The meeting number is 2334-349-1619, and the password is Burlington. So the first thing that I like to do is this Pledge of Allegiance, even though it's not on the list, if that's okay with everybody. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item up is the approval of the January 30th, 2024 meeting minutes.
So moved or seconded, one of us.
Okay, so whoever's taking the notes, you pick. All right. All right, I will go ahead and take a roll call. And Chris Monaco,
Aye.
Martha Simon,
Aye.
Jeremy Brooks,
Aye.
Eric Conti,
Yes.
Nicole Kasha, Nicole.
Abstain.
I'll go back to Nicole. Bob?
Yes.
Okay. And let's see. I don't see David Rosenblatt.
Yes.
Oh, Dennis. Okay, you are here.
You're a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Dennis Milano?
Yes.
Jennifer Priest?
Aye.
Okay. John Lyons?
Aye.
And Margot's not on, correct?
No, I'm here. Aye.
Oh, okay, I didn't see you on, so you're an aye. And the chair is an aye, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
7, 8,
7.
9, 10, 11. 0, 0. Okay. And I think that's the only thing we're voting on this evening. So the next item up on the list is public comment. I don't see anyone in the audience in person. Is there anybody online who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Okay, no hands up there either. So I guess the next thing is the design update. Oh, I didn't see that. Ah, there we go. It went blank. Never mind. Okay, so we're going to do approval of a couple of invoices. If you'd like to put those up, please. Excuse me. I can't even get the agenda to open. That's all right.
Just catch the presentation up.
All righty. So we have an invoice, number 17, in the amount of $42,070. And we're going to go ahead and vote on both at the same time, if that's okay with everybody. The next invoice number is 9943 in the amount of $58,333. And the next invoice number is 9944 in the amount of $3,526.94.
They all to the same company?
One's Dorn Whittier and the other two are Danisco. So let's go ahead, let's vote on the Dorn Whittier one first,
Same
and
amount?
for $42,070.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, so I am going to go with Chris Monaco,
Aye.
Martha Simon,
Yes.
Jeremy Brooks,
Aye.
Eric Conti,
Yes.
Nicole Kasha,
Yes.
sorry, Bob Cuna,
Yes.
and Dave Rosenblatt. David Rosenblatt?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Gotcha.
Dennis
Dennis
Valano?
Valano?
Yes.
Jennifer Priest? Aye. Margot Bunker?
Yes.
John Lyons?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is an aye. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 0, 0. So now we'll vote on the two Danisco invoices, invoice number 9943 in the amount of $58,333 for the schematic design. And the other invoice for Danisco is invoice number
9944 in the amount of $3,526.94.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All right. Chris Monaco,
Aye.
Martha Simon,
Yes.
Jeremy Brooks,
Aye.
Eric Conti,
Yep.
Nicole Kasha,
Yes.
Bob Cuna,
Yes.
David Rosenblatt, Dennis Valano,
Yes.
Jennifer Priest,
Aye.
Margot Bunker,
Yes.
John Lyons,
Lyons?
Yes.
and the chair is an aye, so that is 12-0-0. Okay. And now we go to the design update.
Hello. Just checking. Yeah, it's not showing up on. Mhm.
Hang tight while we get the right screen up here.
There you go. I need my glasses. All right. Hi, everyone. So tonight we'd just like to give everyone an update as to where we are. We have now completed a couple of months of schematic design. It's a 6-month process. We'll be submitting the schematic design package to MSBA in June of this year. And last week we had quite a bit of activity at the Fox Hill site. So on your screen you'll see, maybe Andrea could point to it. We had a test well drilled, right around where the little hand is shown, as well as some geotech borings to examine the soil conditions underneath where we're anticipating building the school and the areas around. We also did a little bit more exploratory, sampling of the Fox Hill School. We did have asbestos hazmat testing done very early in the process, but there are certain areas that the consultant had listed as assumed to be containing asbestos, but did not want to do any really deconstructive work. So the week really provided an opportunity to confirm some of these items, which will help us get a little bit closer with our numbers, right? So where he had assumed there were asbestos, we confirmed, and in some areas there were, in some areas there weren't. So we'll have tighter numbers as part of the schematic design package as we budget for this project. A couple of weeks ago, we also met with the folks from the Science Center and some of the school department and had a really great conversation about outdoor learning. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Maybe real quick on the asbestos testing. Since we deal with it often, we know there's no reason to be alarmed about what was found, but I think it's worth noting that as it exists, it's fine left undisturbed. So for members of the public or folks that don't deal with it every day, I don't think there's really any reason to be concerned. Everything that was found
Right.
is very typical in a school, in a building of this generation. So
Thank you, Steve.
Excuse me, through the chair, if I may. I was wondering if we have any results back from the geothermal test wells and the geotechnical borings, or we wait, because that was just last week.
Right. No, that's going to take a little bit of
Okay.
time. So the borings our geotech engineers will provide a report that will be available in a few weeks.
Okay.
And the geothermal test well will take a little bit of time because they also run a pump for a couple of days to test the conductivity. And so we'll also have a report in a few weeks for
A few
that.
weeks, thank you.
Okay, and on the screen, actually, you'll see some images of the drill rig that was on site. It is going to be what you'll see once construction starts and we get to drilling our 70 to 80 wells. It's going to be pretty far from the existing school, but as we get closer, we'll talk about, what to expect for noise and just in terms of separation between the students and construction activities. Okay, next.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody have any additional questions or comments? Okay,
All right.
and so I guess next is
Yeah,
the
so we'll-
permitting
well-
updates, or do you want to talk more?
We'll talk about, do you want to talk about permitting? I think that's another line item, but yeah, we'll have that. We'll talk about permitting after the design
Okay.
update. Yeah. So just a quick update regarding our outdoor learning discussion. Really a fun conversation, actually, because there is so much that the science curriculum is exploring, and the Science Center folks, they're amazing. They're just amazing. So in talking about the potential for the site, we identified a few areas where we can have dedicated space for outdoor learning, and then play space that is really kind of nature inspired, and then how can we connect to the existing outdoor trails. So in discussing this, we looked at the potential areas to develop. Next, please. And you'll see, if maybe you can zoom in a little bit, Andrea. Yeah,
blow that up a little, please?
apologize. So on our site, you'll see these little numbers, 1 through 9, where we have the opportunity to do different kinds of learning, different ways to develop the site. So in areas 1 and 2, 3 and 7 is really kind of a more quiet, dedicated outdoor learning space. We can also, we looked at ways we could provide flexible spaces, flexible furniture that could be outdoor furniture or built into the site. And then in the area where the play area is, we could provide more active activities and active ways to learn. It might be using musical instruments or using play equipment. And then finally, if you can see item number 9, component 9, is where we are planning an outdoor learning area on the roof of the first floor, which would be directly accessible from the second floor. So in this area, we talked about providing maybe a weather station or some activities so that folks can go directly from the science, technology, engineering space, which is on that floor, right out to this space. We talked a little bit about bees and honeycombs, and just there were so many great ideas that we are really excited about developing some more concepts for this. So I think at our next meeting, we'll be able to share a little bit more and some more visuals. Next. All right, so we have been also looking at the site and site.
Madam Chair, just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just to clarify, the science department was Sean and Wendy, the science center, so just, it was a very elementary focused conversation, so it was appropriate. And Wendy, as you know, has a sort of a museum of science aquarium background, so it lended itself well to the conversation. So it wasn't the high school science department, it was Sean and Wendy, and they did an outstanding job.
Thank you.
Really did, yeah. Okay. So at the end of feasibility study, PSR, right, preferred schematic report, this is where we landed with the site plan. We looked at a traffic circle, a separate bus drop-off, and separate car and automobile and van drop-off. So since then, we've been looking, taking a harder look at the traffic circle and circulation and looking at how best to provide that bus drop-off. Next. And are developing the site a little bit further. This is an overall view of the circulation pattern that we might expect to see, still with a separate access for the buses and a separate car and van drop-off, and that you'll see in the pink and the blue. So as part of this study, we're also looking at how we can develop the site for playgrounds and how to fold in the outdoor learning spaces. So we just started looking at this conceptually, and you'll see the area to the north of the school is a little pocket that we could develop to relate to the wetland, yep, but separate from the service area, which we still intend to bring in from the bus drop-off area. And then as we move clockwise around the site, you're going to see this purple kidney shape. That would be the playground equipment, which would be constructed on top of a rubberized surface that would be similar to what is at the Memorial School. And as we actually had a meeting today, which was really great to, with the folks talking. We had Judy Crocker from Safe Routes to School. We had someone from the police department, from the traffic division, and some folks from the school department. So we had a really good discussion, and Chris was there, and it was really helpful in talking about what the priorities are and how we can make the site as safe as possible for the kids. So while this is our preliminary idea, we actually developed a few other ideas, and we're continuing to study this. So the next slide will...
Hold on one second. We have a question from
So I
Ms. Priest.
see the cars, I see the van drop-off, I see the bus. What was the proposed transport route for walkers? Was
So
it to follow out towards Westwood and around, across
Yeah.
the bus loop? Okay.
So, yep, it basically would be following the existing sidewalk setup. So the sidewalks currently on Fox Hill are on the west side. So the walkers, actually the next slide shows the pedestrian access. Oh, no. There you go. Okay, so you'll see the blue dots. Actually, it's more like a blue blobs. Apologies. So the blue line shows the pedestrian access, yep, along the existing sidewalk. We would extend the sidewalk around the traffic circle clockwise, and then would connect to the sidewalk that's over on Westwood and would cross over to where the bus drop-off is. And we anticipate that students, because now that the school is oriented so that the classroom wing is on the west side, where the buses would drop off the kids would go directly to their classrooms. We anticipate that students walking to school and bicycling to school would also follow the sidewalk route and enter the school from that entrance point. And then kids, folks who are going to play at the playground or go to visit the fields outside of the school hours would continue along the front plaza to go on to the fields area. Are there any questions?
When we were talking about this, we have like, I don't know, we had 4 or 5 other options for almost dismissal other than for discussion. But I think the outcome from today, which isn't a recommendation yet, was that the 4-way stop sign really isn't much of an improvement, which is shown here, rather than a traffic circle or roundabout. I think it was the maybe previous slide. Yeah. The concern, and it's a totally valid concern, is having students cross the bus loop walkway to the school, right? We want the students to be safe. We want them to use the sidewalks and obviously to the quickest point of entry into the school. But we're going to continue to further explore the crossing guards, their locations, the safety for the students that will be crossing the crosswalks and making sure that it's a safe and appropriate location for them to cross. Conversation came up about using raised crosswalks. So, and we actually hear that it's being studied along, was it Vincent or Fox Hill? It's also being considered outside of this project as well for calming measures, right? So it really does slow down traffic. So I just want to point out that we're looking at options for the safety of the students.
Ms. Simon?
So because we jumped around on the slides, I'm now a little confused. I saw the presentation has the roundabout, and it has the 4-way stop. And I'm wondering if you just say what the advantages of each one are that we are aware of right now, so we know what the pros and cons are that we can be thinking about. Thank you.
Right. So when we discussed this at our earlier meeting, we really were looking at it in terms of safety. So safety as a priority. Each of these are very similar in that both options provide traffic calming. They slow traffic down. The reason we presented an option B, which is the 4-way stop option, which is the next slide, is that it is, there you go. So what we want to do is present as many, we don't want to leave a stone unturned. So we wanted to say, to look at this and say, okay, what else can we do besides a traffic circle? A 4-way stop is a viable option. It is less expensive. So if we're looking at it in terms of what are the pros and the cons, it is, one of the pros is that it is less expensive. One of the cons is that there's a potential of cars queuing and waiting at the stop sign, right? So without having a full study done, which can be done, there might be some additional time that is associated with folks waiting to turn left, either when they're leaving the school or when they're trying to turn left onto Westwood if they're on Fox Hill heading north. So the negative, the con, I guess, for the 4-way stop is that it doesn't keep traffic moving that a circle would. The circle would provide the calming, would keep traffic moving at any given time. In this case, the 4-way stop would require folks to actually stop, but also would require folks to be courteous, to let folks in, to turn, etc. So we didn't want to finish our study without having taken a look at this. And by no means is this the only other option. We also are taking another look at potentially moving the whole bus loop down into where the auto drop-off parking area is. And so I think at our next meeting, we'll provide potentially a hybrid option. So we just kind of want to take you through our thinking and also talk a little bit about what folks at our previous meeting also talked about. I think the traffic circle was actually looked upon very favorably, just because I think those who have experienced traffic circles really do notice that they do really move traffic around pretty efficiently, as opposed to a four-way stop, which requires full stops and potential a few cars waiting. So I'd say that was,
So for me, with the traffic circle, the concern is that, a lot of people aren't very good at traffic circles.
Yeah.
So, if you have, I understand we have people, who are going to be, the holding signs and whatnot. And I just worry about someone not, with a circle versus a stop, not seeing, that sign go up to stop because they're going around the circle. So are there, do you have other schools that we could maybe see where you've put in the circle to show us how it flows and works? If that's a concern for safety anyway.
Right.
And then we don't want to see the other proposed options that you might come up with later.
well, we have not, I don't think we've done a school where we've put in a circle. Usually that's kind of outside of the entry portion of the school, which is usually what we're responsible for. But there are many areas where circles have been put in that are local. I know that Donna's got one down her neighborhood, which seem to be very effective. And we could point some of these areas out if you want to take a drive out and check it out.
I appreciate that, because like I said, I've seen them work in neighborhoods really well. Like I said, my concern is just the neighborhood, there's really not a lot of people, and there are going to be a lot of kids and people, and
Right.
just thinking people might be confused and
Yeah.
not seeing because it's not a square.
Yeah.
I think it is a little unique to have two public roads kind of funnel into
Right.
the same portion of a site that are used to communicate with one another, separate from those that might just be arriving for school. So I think that's why there may not be a lot of examples where a traffic circle is used on school property, just because it is a very unique situation.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any other questions? Jennifer Priest.
Just something to point out, though, with the four-way stop, you now have parents who come up Westwood, turning down Fox Hill to then turn left across the traffic.
Exactly.
So that's a potential big backup.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
there's a good amount of traffic that comes up that way, especially people on the other side of 62, so.
Yeah, no, I get the backup part
Yeah.
too. I was just thinking safety more than anything. I get
Well,
the, so I think the circle will keep
Traffic
things flowing for
circles
sure.
are a traffic mitigation measure.
Right.
A lot of towns have put them in. I know when I was going to school in Worcester, they were adding them in the neighborhoods to slow down the traffic, which seems to be a big concern that was voiced to us, even though we don't control that piece by the neighbors. So if we can do something to help slow the traffic down for them, I think it'd be a good choice, so.
Thank you. Anyone, other questions or comments?
Follow up from the meeting earlier today, I think having Judy there from Safe Routes was really helpful to hear from her. She offered some comments that were very appreciative of some of the considerations that have been put into what's being considered right now in terms of, but I think it also identified there's a lot of things to work through, so it's far from complete. I did appreciate Danisco bringing some options that weren't maybe the brightest ideas, but showing their work. Just testing them out so that they're available for others to see how, in contrast to the options that seem to have haven't risen to the top in a vacuum. So that was really helpful to see.
And I did just want to make sure that, just to acknowledge that Liz from planning was also there, which was great to have her involved, and she seemed supportive of the traffic circle as well, felt that was an improvement of the area.
Thank you. Ms. Simon?
Did Judy Crocker from Safe Routes to School have a preference, or, because she's done a lot of this work, so what was her thought on it?
I think she also felt that a traffic circle was really a good way to mitigate the traffic. Yeah. Yeah, we've been bouncing a lot. Okay. No, we can move on. Yes. Okay. So in looking at the overall site, in this case, we've kept the circle as the option for the rest of these slides. we were looking at ways to test fit some of the fields. We were hoping Parks and Rec would be at the meeting, but they were not. But I think we'll follow up with them. And as we continue to look at the potential of moving some things around on parking wise, we're likely going to shift things around. But this is a good first couple of concepts for what could fit on the fields. In this option, yeah, can you slide it up a little bit, please, so that we could see the fields? Yeah. So in this option, there are many, it's a pretty nice site with, when the existing school is demolished, once the new school is complete, we have such opportunity to create really great open space. So what we did was we just kind of took a look at what can fit potentially and what does it mean for the site, because there are areas, there are pockets where the slope is a little bit steeper, and we just need to understand what the priorities are and fold that into the cost estimate for the total project budget. So in this case, we placed it could be a multi-purpose field, but in this case, there are 2 U10 soccer fields that are located and a softball field. And we have three total potential options for fields. It seemed favorable to actually place either multi-purpose field or soccer field next to the playground area because it provides really multifunction space for the kids as they're running around in the playground. They now have this open space where they can throw a football around, kick a soccer ball around. They still have access to a softball field where they can play kickball. And in all of these options, we're looking at providing accessible paths so that those who are not able to walk on, they can wheel on and have a level walkway to each of the fields. So this is one way to look at the fields. Another way is to look at potentially 2 softball fields and a multi-purpose or U10 soccer field. And then one last option is to provide 2 softball fields and 1 U10 soccer field. It seemed that the first 2 options are actually better suited for school use just because they provide a much more open space. And this was what we had discussed at the meeting today. So if we go back to the first option, sorry, Andrea, making you bounce around a bit. Yeah, I think if we're going to study this further, again, depending on how the parking scoots around, we would likely pull the softball field away from the multipurpose or the U10 field that's closest to the playground. But it seemed favorable to place a larger field next to the playground than the softball field. Sure.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Simon?
I heard that you also met with the recreation department, and have they had any input yet into this? And because I'd be interested in knowing if they think having 2 soccer fields and 1 baseball or vice versa is a better one. So what's happening with that?
We didn't have the opportunity to talk to them today about that, but we'll follow up.
Yes, Mr. Brooks.
I just fired off this presentation to Brendan and Kelly, so I'm asking them to put on the next agenda item for rec commission.
Okay, great. No one online having their hands up at all? Ms. Priest?
I'm not familiar with it, but how does the lacrosse transfer over to the U10 soccer fields? Is that enough space?
I think those are actually a little smaller. Yeah, the U10's fields are too small for lacrosse. So it would be definitely a concern. That's why I want to get their buy-in.
Yeah. And Ms. Simon, did you have another question?
Yeah, and so the other question I had was the Conservation Department, Conservation Commission raised some concerns about balls going into the vernal pool, and so is the idea of some kind of a fence to keep balls out. I think all of these fields are further away. There was one picture where it looked like the hits were going to go more directly down the hill and perhaps into the vernal pool, so I would want to look at, softball fields that are going to hit the ball not into the vernal pool orientation-wise, but also about including a fence to catch balls, I think would be really valuable.
Yes, Mr. Riggs.
I think the option, in talking to the Conservation Commission, is also to have natural barriers. You know, a natural barrier, you know, a line of shrubs might be just as effective as a fence and a lot more pleasant. A fence
Yeah,
with,
I had forgotten about that option, but I
Yeah.
agree that's a good option.
a fence might keep more people out, unless it's a thorny hedge, but anyway.
Thank
There
you,
are
Mr. Riggs. Any other?
Yeah, just,
Yes, Ms. Denisko.
If you could let us know, Jeremy, when the next rec meeting is, we'd love to actually be in attendance and be part of the conversation if that's possible, or we can go
Absolutely.
through is it Ryan and who?
Brendan and
Brendan.
Kelly.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. For some reason, we thought they had responded and were going to be present today, and then they
As soon as I get a
weren't.
response back, I'll let you know.
It's okay. That'd be great. And you know, I think what we also want to say is, again, what you're seeing here are just concepts and ideas. We, you know, could have a larger softball or multi-purpose field, recognizing this probably is not big. It depends on what grade you want to play lacrosse, but clearly a U10 field isn't large enough for high school lacrosse. But, you know, where the lines start and end for the softball fields too, or baseball, whatever, are up for discussion. We don't have to have them. They could extend more. There could be overlaps. No fences is what we're proposing here, so that, you know, you really could use and stripe the fields as well as you want.
Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that same thing. In some instances in our youth fields, we don't have a fence, either on, let's say, the softball, baseball field and or on the soccer fields, and we don't permanently stripe those. So we'll paint those yearly, and we can take advantage of the outfield of, you know, either the softball, baseball fields. So I think there's a lot more variability as to what space we can use, and then use it per season for the sport being used. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And anybody online, do you see having a hand up? Okay. Let's go to the next, I guess.
All right. We are starting to make the building a building. So as we continue along in schematic design, we are refining the spaces and making sure walls are where they need to be, doors where they need to be, and looking at relationships between the toilet rooms and custodian. I mean, very basic things that are not so exciting, but as we start to look at this, we start to give the building shape. And we're starting to look at the building three-dimensionally, so hopefully at our next meeting we'll have a little bit more to share. We're looking at where it might be appropriate to put windows, tall windows. We're going to be doing a study on proportions for classroom windows, so we'll share that with you as well. But what this shows is that we've kind of defined the music suite area next to the gym. It's going to be a really wonderful space with direct access to the stage, the platform in the cafeteria. We have a great connection then from the stairs going upstairs that lead directly out to the outdoor learning area that's on the roof. And we've defined the admin area a little bit further, and we will be following up with folks to review some of these spaces as they get further refined. And then on the second floor, again, not too much has changed in terms of relationships. Again, really not exciting, but we're looking at toilet rooms and how those lay out, really important for the use of this building. But also we're starting to look at designing the library, the media center a little bit, and how that relates to the STEM, the science, technology, engineering space. And then we're going to be looking at refining the space outside of that area as well. So there's more to come, but we wanted to show you that the spaces now have walls and doors, which is really kind of huge because we're just looking at blocks earlier, right? So this is all good, and we're going to continue to share our progress with you and get you all excited.
Dr. Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Donna, MSBA has approved the building flip and the programming and or sorry, Vivian, I just wanted to make sure that things have gone positively with MSBA in terms of where we are.
Right, so Dr. Conti's referring to when we were with the MSBA for the Facility Assessment Subcommittee meeting prior to their vote in 2 days. On Wednesday, the building was actually still flipped the opposite way. But we immediately reached out after consensus here that we wanted to flip the building, and that was actually a positive response to some of their comments as well. We reached out to them. We said, we flipped the building. Please let us know if we need to do anything further. And the last response several weeks ago was, looks good, we'll get back to you if we have any questions. So we're taking that as a positive, and they haven't asked us to go back in anticipation of the vote on Wednesday. So, yeah, I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Could you zoom out, please? No, just show the whole slide. There you go. Oops.
You need to? Just playing with you.
All right. Yes, yes. So what we want to do is just summarize where we've been with recent activities. We talked a little bit about that already. And then the anticipated upcoming meetings. And what we didn't put in here, which we should have, is that we have the MSBA board meeting is actually in a couple of days for approving this project to move forward. So we, as part of schematic design, will be meeting with various departments. We'll follow up with public safety, again, as we're refining the driveway, the access, the pedestrian access. We also will be meeting with the DCM in mid-March to bring them along as well. This is all the town agencies. And then with Planning Board, we're anticipating and really welcoming their participation. I think they will definitely be at the next meeting when we talk about traffic, but they will be participating in other upcoming meetings as well.
Through the chair.
Thank you, Ms. Simon.
Could we add the rec department to this? Because it sounds like we're going to also be
Yes.
talking with the Recreation Commission or department. I don't know which one is the right agency, but yeah.
And that's it.
Good?
Yeah,
All
for
right,
update.
thank you very much. And the next item is the permitting updates.
Okay. We had a discussion a week before last on some other topics, but what came up was some permitting deadlines. And of course, the permitting means a lot of things to a public project, but in relation to talking about the project funding timeline, it was brought to our attention and in discussions previously about what's allowed zoning-wise for an emergency generator, backup generator. And I think we talked maybe briefly about it in an earlier meeting, but it was brought to our attention that the site is currently zoned as a residential district, which restricts the use of diesel fuel emergency backup generators. Of course, we've begun the process with Eversource and MassSave to try to receive incentives through their grant program, and that program restricts the use of any fuel on site, natural gas on site, which currently the emergency generator runs off of at the existing site. So what it means is that for the project to reap the benefits of the MassSave program, it would need to be a diesel fuel generator, but currently zoning restricts that use based on how it's zoned. So the project would be seeking a zoning change to a business class zoning district, which needs to go through town meeting and is a process all of its own. So it was originally discussed to put the project's approval and the zoning change in the same town meeting, thinking that the timeline has passed us by, because as Amy Warfield explained, that timing is 90 days, I think, prior to town meeting. So we thought to get it included in, or 45 days, 45 days. Yeah. So we thought the window had closed for spring town meeting, but I think it was maybe the next day. So we kind of did a bit of a fire drill, at least to get the article and what is needed to hold our place for consideration. And we realized that there's some more supplemental information that needs to accompany that. But we think there's still a chance to get that on town meeting in the spring if all goes well. The backup plan being, and it sounds like it's not too uncustomary to also do it at the same time if there's other projects that have gone through the same time frame. I forget if it was Paul or Amy that provided that recent example. So it wouldn't be unheard of, but it would be nice to know. You'd think logic would prevail in that, the project could only proceed at town meeting and then with the zoning change, but rather than have it come down to that, we still think there's a chance to get that included, the zoning change on spring town meeting. So there's still some homework to do. Please chime in if I left any important details out, but that was the most critical piece of information that came out of the last couple of weeks.
The only thing I want to add from maybe a positive to the diesel is that diesel generators are designed or built so that they can now use what's called hydro vegetable. It's a vegetable oil. It's not, so you don't have to do anything to the generator to take this, it's called HVO, hydro vegetable oil. It really is. But it's not readily available just yet, but there's a big push for it, and it's not just for emergency generators. Everyone and every industry is looking at this as an alternative to diesel. So we're hoping that might be some silver lining in all of this. Is that better than your, is that better than your lunch program?
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
No, that's a great clarification. Also, it doesn't necessarily mean that the project can't happen if the zoning change doesn't happen. It just means that what's on the table in terms of grant for Mass Save, which is, a seven-figure amount, it's substantial, would be off the table. So we think, sorry, go ahead, Roger.
Oh, it wasn't my turn yet.
I don't. We think it's a fairly logical decision or process to follow. I just wanted to be clear that the entire project's future isn't hinging upon this change.
Thank you. And Mr. Ricks, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just I guess a passing thought. I certainly hope that the zoning change comes to pass. I did get my public notice, et cetera, but it might also seem to me that the Board of Appeals could grant a particular variance in the residential area for a very specific thing. They might be amenable to that, but I'd rather stick to the mainline process as opposed to looking for an exception.
Thank you. And Ms. Simon?
I also wanted to just reinforce that we're talking about an emergency generator. So this would only be used in the case of losing electricity. We do have backup generators now at all of our schools, and we need to have a backup generator at a new school as well. And so this would not be unlike other schools. And then with none of it would be burned unless there was an emergency. There wouldn't be any fossil fuel burning in this case. And if the HVO, the hyper vegetable oil, whatever it's called, actually, starts being produced in amounts, then it also would mean we could switch to not even storing diesel fuel, traditional diesel fuel on the site, and we could, I would certainly want to look to do that if that's an opportunity. And I also just wanted to say, respond to Mr. Brown's comment that the project can go on without this, but we would lose a significant amount of financial incentives if we don't have an on-site generator in this kind of way. They looked at the other options, and there really isn't one. So I'm glad we're looking into it. I appreciate all the work that went into getting this onto May town meeting. I think it will make it simpler. So thank you.
I just one minor clarification. The generator will need to be run regularly for 30 minutes once a week, or, yeah, so it's like monthly or weekly or monthly. More to you. Yeah, just like for 30 minutes, but so just for it to exercise. Hopefully not fire, right?
Yeah,
My
thank you.
neighbor likes to run theirs about 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, so, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Bob, were we told that, just to Mr. Riggs' point, that this wasn't something we could get a variance for? Because we looked into that, Roger, and
Yeah, again, as Dr. Conti just mentioned, does not appear to be a mechanism right now for a variance because the actual law pertains to storage of diesel fuel on a residential zone property. So anything's possible, but it's not something that typically happens.
that's why, yeah, that's why we scrambled for the zoning change.
No, thanks for that information. I think that kind of puts things in perspective, really. Okay, so actually the next item that's up is the project funding timeline, but I'd like to go back to one item. Ms. Kasha brought up that there's one more invoice that we need to vote on and approve we didn't see. So it's Danisco invoice 9945 in the amount of $455.48. So if I could get a motion and
So
a second.
moved.
Second. Okay. And any discussion? Okay. So Ms. Monaco? I'm sorry.
What's it for?
It's Danisco invoice number 9945. I don't see what it's for. Do you know what it's for?
It's for their reimbursable expense number 4, which was,
It's not in my email.
I believe it's for Horsley Witten Group.
What was it for? Ah.
just for the follow-up of the ANRAD, the abbreviated notice of resource area delineation
Okay.
to identify the wetlands.
All right, thank you.
They had some reimbursable costs for mailings and filings as well.
Perfect. Is that okay with you, Ms.?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to go back. Ms. Monaco is a yes. Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
Dr. Conti?
Yes.
Nicole Kasha?
Yes.
Bob Kuna?
Yes.
XX and David Rosenblatt? Dennis Villano?
Yes.
Jennifer Priest?
Aye.
And Margot Bunker?
Yes.
And John Lyons?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is an aye, so it's 12-0-0. Okay, thank you, everyone, for letting me go back to that. So the next item is project funding timeline.
Great. I'll kick this subject off. So on February 12th, we had a discussion, talk about strategy, timeline, key dates, and milestones as it relates to the approval at town meeting and a debt exclusion vote. So Amy, as we talked about, identified some of those milestones and windows of opportunity and process to follow. And ultimately, as we've been planning since the beginning, lining up fall town meeting and election. So there's a couple of dates, and I believe ultimately it comes down to a recommendation from Ways and Means and the Select Board. The Select Board on what goes on the warrant for town meeting, but there's a couple of election dates coming up. I think one option would be to do a special election outside of the recurring dates, which would be at the cost of the district. So typically that's not the preferred option if there's already one that's happening, because the cost, as Amy mentioned, is about $30,000 directly to the town. So if we're having two within a month, it doesn't really seem beneficial to have a third. But she explained that decision, I think, needs to come from either the building committee as a body or the school committee. So we're kind of bringing it back to this group as a discussion. that at some point, not tonight, that there should be a decision made about which election to target in terms of project approval. So there's currently one on September 3rd, which is the state primary election, and then there's the presidential election on November 5th. So I think there's some strategy or just some thought that needs to go into who's showing up at the polls on those dates. You know, how do we get members? Hopefully, there's a great cross section of the population attending both of those dates. But if there's anything that needs to be considered about strategically how this committee would like to see that positioned in terms of the approval of the project, I think it warrants a future discussion at this body and maybe school committee. And so I don't think that's our decision. And Amy, the way she put it was that it sounds like it's a building committee and or school committee decision to make that recommendation. So I just wanted to park that there and maybe offer up a chance for any questions about that specifically.
Ms. Monaco.
Before we get into deciding on like when to do a debt exclusion, I think we need the powers that be on the town side to decide whether or not we actually have to have a debt exclusion. And I believe that would be a conversation between Ways and Means and the Selectmen, as you mentioned. And they would have to come to a decision, and then if we really have to do it, then we would have to follow through with picking a date. And both times I think are tough because traditionally the very involved people in town get out to vote for the town elections, and the people who may never vote in a town election are coming out for the September primary and the presidential election, and that may not favor our getting funding to use those elections. It's just my input. I'm kind of hoping that that between the Ways and Means Committee and the Selectmen, they'll see a way to do the police station and this project without a debt exclusion. But I guess just hoping on my own here.
No,
Thank
thanks.
you.
And I think we've been operating under the assumption that it was going to require debt exclusion just from the conversations we've had so far. So I
know.
appreciate you revisiting that and just parking that if those other powers that maybe have those conversations, that we just understand timing-wise what needs to happen and when. So those conversations are happening. As I mentioned, started earlier in February. We plan to have several of those over the next several weeks and months.
And Dr. Conti, it looked like you wanted to make a comment.
I did, and I was attended that meeting as well. I think there's just some other contextual information to help shape this, is that the police station as a project is going to be presented at May's town meeting. So town meeting will vote on the police station ahead of a debt exclusion, given the timing of this, whether it's September 3rd or November 5th. I don't think, in speaking with Mr. Sagarino, that he's going to want to wait from May until November for a debt exclusion if it's needed. So, so I think that's part of the context. We would not be ready to present the Fox Hill building project. I'm sort of looking at you all now for May, because we would need to get to the end of June for an MSBA vote. So we probably wouldn't have a town meeting vote on the project until September 23rd at the earliest. So it may be that we don't have to do town meeting ahead of a debt exclusion. So if the debt exclusion is September 3rd, then we would have knowledge of the debt exclusion outcome ahead of going to town meeting. So again, Mrs. Monaco, to your point, if the debt exclusion fails, then the only other option we would have is that town meeting would approve a different funding mechanism on September 23rd, if that's even possible. And I don't know the mechanism of doing that. But and the other contextual piece I would say is that there can be a for any special election, there would need to be a separate ballot for debt exclusion. So people would need to pick up a ballot to vote on the primary and then a separate ballot to vote on the debt exclusion. And then that would need to have two separate questions. If in fact both projects were requiring a debt exclusion vote, so there would be a question for a police station and then a separate question that MSBA requires for the Fox Hill project. So it wouldn't be we need to borrow this amount of money for both projects. It would be the projects would need to be separated. Again, Steve, correct me, my understanding is they could be on the same ballot. It would need to be a separate ballot, but would need to be two separate questions. So I think that was it.
That's right.
And then the other thing, the proposed first day of school is, school committee will be seeing that in a couple weeks, will be August 28th, which is Wednesday. So that would be Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday is off because that's Labor Day weekend. Labor Day is the 2nd. So the special election is the Tuesday after Labor Day. Again, just some contextual information, whether that's good or bad. People can, I don't know the proclivities of the town, but families would be back and school would be open, at least for grades 1 through 12. So, but I don't know if obviously the turnout for a national election would be higher than for a state election, but I think that would be one of the two. So there's a lot of questions here. My understanding in speaking with the town manager, that Mr. Paul, that he wants both projects to go to a debt exclusion, but that doesn't mean the projects will go through a debt exclusion. And Steve, the ultimate decision maker in that is the select board. Is that, again, that was, I believe, what Amy said, is they would, with the recommendation, obviously, Roger, from Ways and Means, but the select board would vote what projects to go through what process.
And thank you, Dr. Conti and Ms. Monaco.
There is another way to do a debt exclusion, and that is to have the vote on whether or not the town meeting will fund the project before the debt exclusion. And then if the debt exclusion passes, it's funded that way. But if town meeting has already voted to approve it and the debt exclusion fails, then town meeting funds it through the ordinary methods. So what made me think of that, I've heard it discussed in, the recent past, but what made me think of that is when you said that police station would go to town meeting in May, if they pass the funding, then the debt exclusion for them doesn't mean that the project, it just means if it passes, it would be paid for that way, and if it doesn't pass, it would be paid for the old-fashioned way. So if we're gonna do that, why wouldn't we do the same thing for schools and have town meeting pass them and then let the people decide how they want to pay? Do they want to pay in their regular tax bill or in a separate excluded debt?
Okay, Mr. Riggs.
I kind of hesitate to open the can further at the moment without more information.
It's Pandora's box. Go ahead.
Well, yes, but anyway, in either case, town meeting needs to approve the funding, and it'll get funded through bonding, short-term funds and long-term funds over time. The debt exclusion is a measure that helps us protect us against having our operating budget capped because of Proposition 2.5, the overall long-term growth of the tax rate. And the choice of what to debt exclude, if to debt exclude, is only sort of makes any sense in the context of the long-term growth of the Burlington budget as a whole over the next 5 or 10 years. So it's not really quite either or in that sense. And you're right, there are a lot of issues that come up, and the timing and judgments about what Burlington voters think about, this or that way of managing our money is kind of open, but it is also up to the select board and Ways and Means and everybody to sort of be forthright about what spending this money means. We're going to get good facilities, and we're going to be paying for them for quite a while. So,
Thank you. And Dr. Conti?
Again, I think there are obviously some things in our control and some things that aren't. So I just want to be clear, we won't be ready for town meeting in May. So we're not going to bring up Fox Hill project in May, but my understanding is the police station will be on the warrant. So town meeting will be voting on police station. They'll be ready. We will not be. The soonest we can be ready, I believe, is September 23rd, if everything goes well with the MSBA. So whether they do that or not, and again, anyone here, I believe it's a 2/3. Is that?
Yeah.
Is it a 2/3 because even if there's a debt exclusion?
Bonding.
What?
It's a bond.
Any bonding is 2/3. So again, it's also a 2/3 vote. Again, that's another sort of factual piece. In speaking with Amy, Steve, please make sure I don't believe she wanted to do 2 separate ballots. So my understanding was she didn't want to do a September 3rd ballot for the police station and then a November 5th ballot for the elementary school. I think she wanted to do one ballot because there's effort that goes into creating the ballot. So I think if both projects were to be brought to a debt exclusion, I think she would want them both done at the same election. That's sort of her preference, but again, the town can create a separate special election. I'm sure they could do 2 separate ballots at 2 separate times. It's just time and money and expense. So those aren't the things we can control, but again, I think the facts are we won't be presenting this project to May town meeting. We need a successful town meeting vote at some point in the process. Whether we debt exclude or not, town meeting still needs to approve the expense by 2/3.
Right.
Mr. Brooks?
So as we talk about it, and we have a lot of, not clear things, in my mind, I go to task organizing and figuring out what the key milestones are, right? So how much lead time does Amy need to get the ballots ready and going? When can Ways and Means provide us an update of, hey, this is how we're going to do it, or with feedback from the select board, and then understanding, what's going to be debt excluded and what isn't. So just understanding those in time and space and how we're going to lay this out and what the lead times are, I think would add clarity to this conversation.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So I guess the next item is the upcoming MSBA meeting.
We already talked about it.
But did you say the date?
Wednesday.
Wednesday at 10 a.m.
I was so
and-
listening to all the
And that's okay.
The
That's
date
okay.
just went right in one ear.
So
and
if
out the other.
anyone and everyone is welcome to attend, it's virtual. It's 10 a.m. There's a link on their website to request, to register for it. So it should be, I just checked the agenda. We're 5th on the agenda. It should be very short and sweet. It starts at 10 a.m. and I would hope we have received their approval to move forward by 10:45.
Ms. Monaco, have a question?
Are they actually voting at that meeting?
They're voting to move the project forward from preferred schematic report into schematic design.
Right, but they're actually taking the vote
They're-
during that time?
yes.
It's not like just letting us know what the vote was?
Nope, they're taking the vote. So we had our facility assessment subcommittee meeting, which was an opportunity for board members to ask any questions they may have or concerns they may have with the project. We, again, had a great meeting, and they would have let us know if there was any reason why this would not be supported at the board meeting. We would not be on their agenda. Yeah, so it should be a vote. They just say refer to your packet. They don't even go into it, right? And hopefully there's a member, I believe Dr. Conti has volunteered to appear to say thank you for their continued support of this project.
Restraining order against her?
No, it's been cleared. It's been cleared. And so, it's just nice to recognize their continued support of the project. But literally, it will be a 5 minutes, so.
Thanks.
All right. And the next item is other topics not reasonably anticipated in the last 48 hours. Anyone have any?
Nope.
Okay.
We have one.
We do.
We do. In the timeline of putting the agenda together, we were provided a proposal from Danisco to do a solar design feasibility study. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, but essentially to gauge the feasibility of rooftop solar and potential solar panels in a parking solar canopy arrangement. So it's, in terms of the budget amount, it fits within what we've been appropriated. It works. This money is not already allocated. So at this time, it would be our recommendation to move to approve Danisco to enter into a contract with Solar Design Associates for the amount on screen to begin that study. And so the timing is important just because as we're in schematic design, it's all about building all costs or any scope, quality, budget, and schedule implications. And so this will give us some more information about what that might mean in terms of the overall cost, orientation, location, size, scope, and schedule. So any further?
No, I think so solar design will also help us determine the best locations to put our rooftop equipment so that we can maximize the roof for solar panels, which is really important. And they'll show, and we'll be presenting the different options for solar, probably a sustainability subcommittee meeting, probably more appropriate to have that very large conversation. And also what the opportunities are if solar canopies are allowed in the parking lot, which are still something that needs to continue to be discussed. But the other component of this, which is, totally up to the town, to the district, if you would like, that they will be providing some costs and savings as it relates to the solar panels. So right now you use PPAs, power purchase agreements, thank you, which, you share in the energy with a third party. But now there are tax incentives, just like for the ground source heat pumps, there are these tax incentives where you might even be able to own them and get money back. So we'll go through that whole exercise as well as part of this study. Not saying you have to take it, but it will give you kind of an opportunity to evaluate it.
Do you need us to take a vote to move forward?
Yeah,
with
so
that?
we recognize the timing is kind of last minute, but understanding where we are in SD, again, the information is in the folder if you want to take a look at it. It was just added today, so we understand the timing is not ideal, but hopefully given the scope and the amount, it makes it a little more palatable.
If you tell me the wording of the motion, I'll make it.
Yeah, right there.
Danisco agreement number 4.
Do you want me to just read? Can you read it? It's amendment.
In the amount of $11,495. That's all
That's all.
for solar design accessories.
Associates.
Okay, so you're
I'm sorry, associates.
making the motion?
I'm making the motion.
Who's going to second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, is there any additional discussion? Okay, I'll go ahead and take roll call. Ms. Monaco?
Aye.
Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Mr. Brooks?
Aye.
Dr. Conti?
Yes.
Ms. Kasha?
Yes.
Mr. Kuna?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenblatt? David Rosenblatt?
Yes.
Okay. Dennis Milano?
Yes.
Jennifer Priest?
Aye.
Margot Bunker?
Yes.
John Lyons?
Yes.
And the chair is a yes, so it is 12-0-0. All right. And last but not least, any additional public comments? Okay. And it looks like next meetings are going to be Tuesday, March 19th at 6 p.m. and Monday, April 8th at 6 p.m. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
all right. I'm just gonna,
Thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank
All right.
you.